Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin in the Yukon, where the coroner's inquest in Whitehorse is officially pausing while the jury deliberates. Earlier today, the presiding coroner gave the 6 jurors instructions before deliberations began. It comes after 3 weeks of testimony about the deaths of 4 Indigenous women at the Whitehorse Emergency Shelter. Virginie Anne has more.
The presiding coroner gave a brief summary on what we have heard at the inquest over the last 3 weeks. Video, testimony from families, shelter guests and staff. Earlier this week, we heard from higher level of management, including directors and managers from Connective and the Yukon government. Connective took over operation of the shelter from the government in 2022. The inquest heard Connective chose not to continue some procedures the government used when it ran the shelter. One of them was regular bathroom checks. We heard testimony that the bathrooms tend to be a place where overdoses happen. The inquest also heard Connective got rid of guidelines on who can access the shelter and when to call for medical help. That created situations where staff were putting intoxicated guests in wheelchairs and put them to bed rather than call paramedics. All staff members who testified said they never got training on alcohol intoxication and monitoring guests. We also heard that a policy to perform bed checks had been drafted, but was dropped because it was deemed inappropriate. Let's not forget that Darla Skukum was found dead after she was put to bed face down while intoxicated and remained unchecked for more than 12 hours. Cassandra Warville and Miranda Tisha Charlie were found dead in a shower room after nobody checked on them for more than 3 hours. And Josephine Elizabeth Hager laid in the middle of a corridor for several minutes before staff intervened. Now, the jury has been asked to determine the time, the cause, and the contributing factors surrounding all 4 deaths. However, it is not required of the jury to come up with recommendations, but if it does, the recommendations should aim to prevent similar future deaths. The presiding coroner reminded jurors that they must not put any blame on any person or organizations for the deaths. We're now waiting to see what will come out of the deliberations. Virginie Anne, CBC News, Whitehorse.
It's been more than a year since 2 homes exploded in the Northwest Territories. First in Hay River, then another 10 days later in Yellowknife. And now we're learning more about what happened. Fire investigation reports reveal both properties had work done to their propane systems without the required permits. The CBC's Leni Lambrink has been digging into this, and she joins me now with more. So, Leni, let's start by just reminding people what happened back in 2022.
So the first explosion happened at a home in Hay River one morning in November. A garage on Beaver Crescent was completely destroyed. A home on the same property and other homes in the area also damaged. 2 people were hurt, their injuries considered non-critical. 10 days later, a home exploded in Yellowknife. This time it happened in the middle of the night. No one was hurt. A family living there had been asleep, but their bedrooms were spared from the worst of the damage.
Okay, so you got some new information about what happened. What did you learn?
So I was able to file an access to information request and get the fire investigation reports into both blasts. These reports tell us more about how the explosions happened, where the propane was leaking from, what caused that built up fuel to explode. The reports also say that in both cases, rules governing gas-related work in the territory were broken. In Hay River, a gas line running to a generator had been upgraded without a permit, and in Yellowknife, 3 propane tanks were installed without a permit as well.
So is the unpermitted work related to the explosions?
So in Hay River, it could be. The fire marshal found propane was probably leaking from the generator itself or the upgraded pipe leading to it. More specifically, he said they were the only source of propane gas that could have been the source of the leak. He says this is inconclusive though, so he's not certain. In Yellowknife, the language in the report is careful. The investigator very clearly says no direct connection is stated or implied between the failure to secure a permit for the propane installation and the subsequent explosion. In that case, the investigator found that a regulator on the propane tank had failed in the extreme cold. That's how gas was able to pool in a crawl space under the home and eventually explode.
And I understand you spoke to somebody about the importance, basically, of permits in these situations. What did they tell you?
Yeah, so I spoke to Kevin Dunbar. He is a manager and chief electrical inspector with the territory's Compliance and Licensing Division. He wouldn't talk about the specific cases, but he did emphasize the importance of permits in a big way. He says they're necessary for any kind of gas work. Installing a propane tank, changing a line, hooking up an appliance like a furnace. Without them, the territory can't go in and do an inspection.
If somebody does work without a permit, we don't know about it. So we don't know what's going on out there. So if an incident does happen, we have no knowledge of what was installed or anything. So we'll have to go and do an investigation and whatnot. So like I said, permits are key. That way we're kept in the loop. We can do the inspections to ensure compliance. And yeah, regardless if it's a homeowner, a contractor on a commercial building or a residence, it's just making sure that everything's safe.
Dunbar says more than 95% of the time it's a contractor getting a permit, but the territory occasionally gives permits to homeowners too if they prove they can do the work safely themselves.
And is there anything else that we should know that you learned when you were investigating what happened here?
Yeah, so a couple things to mention. Those fire investigation reports do not assign blame for what happened. The investigators classified both incidents as accidental. I also reached out to the companies that did the unpermitted work and people who had been living at those homes. No one wanted to talk to me about what had happened.
Thanks for all your work on this, Leanie.
Thanks, Megan.
The water is rising on the Klondike River. Yukon Protective Services issued a flood watch late this afternoon for sections of the river in Dawson City. This is what it looked like over Dawson today at 11 a.m. You can see the ice conditions on the Yukon and Klondike rivers. The flood watch is in place for the Klondike between the Dredge Pond subdivision and the confluence with the Yukon River. The watch means it's possible the river could exceed its banks. Meanwhile, there's an evacuation alert in place for all of the Klondike Valley. That means residents should be ready to leave, but they aren't in immediate danger right now. Officials expect the Klondike River to crest within the next 4 days. As the NWT warms up, crews are getting ready for wildfires. That includes air traffic controllers. And for them, it means staying the course. Last summer, air traffic controllers in Yellowknife didn't leave during the evacuation. It was their job to coordinate evacuation flights and keep the firefighting air fleet safe, like the helicopters and water bombers. It was intense, but they met the challenge.
I specifically remember during the airlift day, it was, I think, the first day of the airlift, and it was insane. There was airplanes parked everywhere. Places I've never seen us park airplanes before. There was just airplanes everywhere on the airport. Meanwhile, the firefighters are still pushing as hard as possible to fight the fire. So it was a little chaotic.
The air traffic controllers made it through the summer with no major incidents despite the challenges. Ploy says the team is ready for what's in store this summer. Communities across Alberta are also getting ready for wildfires, and some are drawing on experience from last year. The town of High Level is in northern Alberta, close to the Northwest Territories border. It supported thousands of evacuees during the 2023 wildfires, including ones from the NWT. And as Dennis Coveton shows us, it's now preparing to do so again.
Much of northern Alberta is bracing for another rough wildfire season, and here in High Level, the mayor is hoping for rain.
We have dugouts here that have not filled. People are anxious. We're saying don't drain our retention pond in High Level, and normally that's a flooding pond, and not at all this year.
And the fire chief is worried as well.
We're getting to that portion of the year where both our coniferous trees and our deciduous trees, combined with the dry grass, are all flammable.
Last year, thousands of people passed through high level as they were evacuating from the wildfires from the west, the east, and the north of town, including settlements of Fox Lake and Rainbow Lake.
It breaks my heart to see them displaced like that.
The town is preparing for a possible repeat, people driving to safety through smoke and ashes.
We are a bit better prepared in emergency evac for people that have to come and stay for a couple days, overnight, maybe a week in our arena and curling rink.
And they're not the only ones gearing up to support evacuees. 80 kilometers to the east, people in Fort Vermilion are getting ready to take them in.
It starts first with the people. They have to understand that although Fort Vermilion is quite safe as far as wildfire goes, typically we're one of the communities that other communities come to when there's an evacuation.
High Level has asked for provincial and federal help to create a dedicated evacuation center. That request was rejected, which the mayor says was partly because the town is so small. That's the problem they're having with firefighters as well.
We have 21 firefighters right now, including our seasonal, so that's fairly low. For our department, we should be around 30.
But recruitment is challenging in a small community. As the season heats up, officials are urging people to be ready to leave before their situation gets too dangerous.
So an evacuation plan, who you're going to contact, what you're going to take with you. So, what are the key needs you need to take out of your house, and then be prepared to be on your own for 72 hours.
And they're urging people to err on the side of caution.
We're hoping for a quiet season, but we're preparing for the worst just in case.
Dennis Cofton, CBC News, High Level.
Construction will soon begin on a new national defense building in Yellowknife, but it's years over schedule and will cost almost twice its original budget. Yesterday was the groundbreaking for the new facility. Federal Defense Minister Bill Blair and Northern Affairs Minister Dan Van Dahl were there. The new defense building will be in the city's Engle Business District. It'll be almost as big as 2 football fields and include offices, equipment storage, and classrooms. Blair says it's long overdue.
One of the things that I have discovered as the new Minister of Defense is our procurement processes cannot move forward as efficiently as we require them to do. One of the things you'll see in our new defense policy is that I am to undertake a review of those procurement processes and planning processes so that we can get the things that need to be done faster.
Construction starts next month. The building is expected to be finished in 2026 or 2027, and it'll cost $97 million. Foreign interest in northern resources and what that means for Arctic security were big topics of discussion on the final day of the Nunavut Mining Symposium.
What's happening with Russia and Ukraine, they're right on our doorstep, and then the push by countries like China to have a greater stake in the Arctic and to be more involved in the Arctic has just kind of ratcheted up the emphasis, I think, on the North.
Unalak says that's why it's important to connect with communities. He says that with so much foreign interest, engagement is key to protect Nunavut's interests. Dennis Patterson says private companies should also be cautious about their partners. Patterson is Nunavut's former senator, and he moderated today's panel.
To raise capital to develop our rich mineral resources in Nunavut because of the remoteness, the high cost, the lack of transportation infrastructure. So the message was, if you're approached by a foreign, and particularly foreign investors, get to know your partners, make sure that you understand where they're coming from, be wary.
The panel pointed to a Northwest Territories mine as an example of China's interest. China is now a major investor in the Nechalacho project near Yellowknife. The rare earths project was once touted as a made-in-the-north solution for foreign investment. Patterson called the project an example of broken promises. Getting youth excited about mining was also on the agenda today at the Nunavut Mining Symposium. The Redfish Art Society spoke about helping at-risk youth by encouraging them to go into mining and breaking into the workforce. The organization helps train young recruits, including those who've been in and out of jail, so they can work as welders.
I think for a lot of the youth that are part of our program, people have given up reaching out their hand to try and help them. So we're giving hope, we're giving support, and we're showing that we have faith in these youth, that nobody is a write-off. You just need to change the environment or change the approach, and we can help get these kids where they want to be.
Santos says it's important to inspire them and break the intergenerational cycle of abuse they face. The program is open to everyone, but so far, 100% of the participants have been Inuit youth. The organization is seeking funding in order to continue its operations. Yellowknife's Dinta Centre for Research and Learning will receive $5.2 million over 2 years as part of the federal budget. The Dinta Centre has been educating Indigenous students since it opened 15 years ago. The government says this funding will increase access to programming right across the territories.
Dinta is dedicated to creating a future of Indigenous cultural revitalization through reconnection with the land, to create northern Indigenous communities that are radically self-determining, healthy, sustainable, and connected to Indigenous knowledge and practices. That is a passion that our government shares, and one that we are very proud to support.
The new money builds on a $13 million investment in Dinta in 2019. That funding went towards supporting recruitment efforts. The new programming coming to Dinta is expected to be in place within the next 2 years. Students in Dawson City are learning how to create local, sustainable housing, and they're doing it while dealing with the realities of climate change. The project is a direct response to the historic flooding that occurred in the Klondike Valley region last spring. With the help of an architect, the grade 9 class at Robert Service School spent 6 days building model houses from wood. Then, using Google Maps and 3D software, the students placed their houses around the Dawson area. The goal was to design houses that are low carbon to build, low carbon to operate, and resistant to forest fire and floods.
A community-based school has to be relevant to what's happening in the community. That just is, right? And a shop program in particular, stuff we do here has to make sense for what's going on in your community. So whether you're learning to weld so you can be a miner or work in a restaurant, like, it's got to be relevant. So everything about this housing unit is relevant to Dawson's situation right now. And it's obvious that they can see it. And then as we go through grade 11, 12, they'll do more. But it's kids investing in what the town sees as a priority.
Menzies says the next phase is to build bigger structures and use them in real-life experiments.
I will not forgive failure. God has chosen us as a new broom to sweep the Vatican clean of corruption.
What would you like to do with your life?
I'd like to be an international star.
Are you a hug?
You're crying.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
Well, God will take his revenge then.
Yes, he will. With our help.
Moments that are so on trend right now. Ticket pricing, artificial intelligence, being a Swiftie, wild fashion trends, showbiz, and cancel culture. Join me, Alameen Abdulmahmood, for Commotion, available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
A sweeping new report is shedding light on a quiet crisis unfolding in many Canadian hospitals. The growing cost and longer treatment time for those dealing with homelessness. Some facilities are looking at new ways to help these patients navigate the healthcare system better. Lauren Pelly explains.
Mickey Ball is a regular face at this Toronto hospital.
I've been to the hospital about 60 times in the last 2 years.
All while she was living in a park downtown. She says being homeless took a toll on her health, from breathing issues to a mild heart attack.
I've been here for a lot of reasons, My back, my legs swelled up really bad, and I was thinking that I had a blood clot.
Since 2018, hospitals across Canada have been required to track when patients are homeless.
A new report shows there were nearly 30,000 hospitalizations among homeless individuals between 2022 and 2023. The vast majority came through busy emergency departments.
The top 3 reasons were substance use disorders, serious mental health conditions, and cellulitis, a bacterial skin infection. Hospital stays among homeless Canadians were also nearly twice as long and cost more than double the national average.
They may have very serious conditions. They are also in hospital for a longer period of time, and because there may be challenges to discharge that patient to maybe a more appropriate care setting.
The outreach team here works with patients like Ball to help them find a place to live.
This is my home sweet home for my house.
But the team says without enough shelter spaces or affordable housing options in Canada, those success stories don't happen often.
Up until today, it's been months and months since we've actually secured a shelter for somebody.
When there is no shelter space, they come to us.
This physician says housing investments could also benefit Canada's strained healthcare system.
I think we really need to understand homelessness as a healthcare issue, that just as much as we need food and water, we need places to be safe and warm.
Otherwise, thousands of Canadians will remain out in the cold with all the health problems that come with it. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Japanese automaker Honda has announced a multi-billion-dollar electric vehicle investment in Ontario. It'll build new manufacturing plants in the province, and at its center will be a complex north of Toronto. Ethel Musa has that story.
It's being touted as the largest auto investment in Canada's history.
This is absolutely historic.
Japanese automaker Honda is investing $15 billion to build 4 new electric vehicle manufacturing plants in Ontario. The deal includes establishing Honda's first electric vehicle assembly plant, as well as a new standalone EV battery plant at Honda's facility in Alliston, Ontario.
These investments will create well over 1,000 well-paying manufacturing jobs.
The federal government and province are each contributing about $2.5 billion in investment tax credits and through various direct and indirect incentives.
Canada is planning for zero emissions by 2035. So a lot of these movements need to be done. The demand will catch up eventually, but in the meantime, you have to make the investment.
This employment director in Alliston says Honda's investment will also have a positive, lasting impact on the wider community.
It's the spin-off jobs. So there's a lot of parts manufacturers that will now support that facility. But it's the small little mom and pop shops around those facilities too that benefit from more customers.
The new Honda facility will be the 3rd EV battery plant in the province, after Volkswagen in St. Thomas and Stellantis in Windsor. The federal government and automakers say once the assembly plant is fully operational in 2028, it will produce up to 240,000 vehicles per year. Ethel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Legendary hockey broadcaster Bob Cole has died. He was 90 years old. Cole was the Hockey Night in Canada play-by-play voice for countless NHL games for 50 years. He called his last game, a Toronto-Montreal matchup, 5 years ago. Peter Cowan has a look back at Cole's remarkable career.
Bob Cole was there for all the big moments, the wins, the losses, bringing his excitement for hockey and his catchphrases, like during the 1991 Stanley Cup Final.
He was the storyteller of hockey for generations of people like me. You could tell what was happening on the ice by the urgency of his voice. You could kind of close your eyes and you knew what hockey was all about when you heard Bob speak.
Bob Cole got a start in Newfoundland calling regional games. In the 1960s, he was behind the mic for his first NHL game on CBC Radio. Then in the 1970s, he joined Hockey Night in Canada on television, where he stayed for 50 years. Ron McLean first met Cole when he started hosting Hockey Night in Canada in the 1980s.
And Bob Cole walked into the studio and he said, watched the whole game last night. Don't change a thing. And he just, he elevated me then when I was a kid, 26, and he elevated me this weekend when I'm 64. So how do you thank someone for that?
Cole was a proud Newfoundlander, and his home was proud of him too. The Media Box and the Mary Brown Centre in St. John's bears his name. Glenn Stanford has headed a half-dozen professional hockey teams.
Bob Cole is synonymous in the hockey industry, and obviously from a provincial perspective, one of our own, proud Newfoundland guys. So, a sad day for hockey and a sad day for the province for sure.
For a man who spent decades on television, he didn't like to draw attention to himself. For him, it was all about the hockey.
And never mind me or whomever broadcasting, enjoy the game. And I'm trying to pass the message along to the viewers that I am enjoying the game. Done my job.
He kept calling games well into his 80s. His last NHL game was just 5 years ago. Bob Cole was 90 years old. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
The winner of this year's Nuno Quest dog sled race is one of the youngest participants. 25-year-old Nanarak Utak of Iglulik is taking home the first place prize of $20,000. It was Utak's first time racing in the Quest, though he is the third generation in his family to participate in the event.
2 years.
It's been 2 years I've trained my team. My father helped and taught me how to train my team. It was hard, but I was just learning, and he would encourage me not to give up, so I kept at it. He taught me well, and I am grateful to him and others who took the time to discipline me and show me the proper ways to train.
Utak's final time was 33 hours, 58 minutes, and 38 seconds. He was more than 30 minutes ahead of Tom Nakitafik, who finished second, and in third place was Lee Inuarak. This year's race saw 11 teams head from Arctic Bay to Pond Inlet, covering 238 kilometers over 7 days.
Number 8.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. We leave you with the sights and sounds of a square dance competition in Pond Inlet. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.